Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to My Spiritual Money RX. This is your host, Vivian S. de Guzman, and I want to thank you today for tuning in our show because, as we know, that you are here because as a woman, you are a leader, you are here to make money, and sometimes we have different ways of getting there, right? Getting to that flow. And so I have actually invited a very, very special guest today. She is a neurophysiologist scientist. And actually, she has a lot of credentials. Her name is Kayla Osterhoff. So let me see. Miss Kayla, welcome to the show. So you are a neuropsychophysiologist in women's health sciences. Oh my God, that's a tongue twister. Can you share with them a little bit of your experience on how did you ever get that title? Please share with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I am so honored to be here, and I'm excited to speak to the women leaders who are here watching. My name is Kayla Osterhoff. I am a neuropsychophysiologist, and that is just a super fancy way of saying that I study and research the brain and the mind. And specifically, I focus on women's neuropsychology, so the brain and the mind function of women. And I'm excited to talk to all of you today about the science of feminine leadership and the science behind a woman's intuition.
Okay. And that's actually the first question I have for you is there really a science behind women's intuition? Because, my background is physical therapy, right? And of course, everything has to be backed up by science. There has to be some experiments behind it. People have gotten results from it. We know that people get results, right? From the work that we do. But we want to understand what is the science behind intuition. Can you please share with us your insight and your experience about that?
Yes. So we've all heard the term a woman's intuition, and it's actually a real, true, tangible thing that neuroscientists are now able to measure in a woman's brain and see that it is heightened in the female brain versus the male brain. So specifically, there's actually one time during our female hormone cycle that happens, on a monthly repeating cycle and throughout our lifetime. We have one time during that cycle, during the menstruation phase, which we'll get into a little bit later, but during this time of our female hormone cycle, when our estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest levels, what happens is our metabolic function decreases. But what we see what happens in the brain is our brain function shifts, and we actually see enhanced, what scientists call cognitive empathy in the brain. And so that is a fancy scientific term for intuition. And so we can actually see that a woman's intuition comes online even more strongly during this special phase of her biorhythm, which is only one of 4, by the way. And we'll get into all the juicy details of that.
Yes. Okay, so in the meantime, let's see if I can ask you certain questions to actually educate our audience, right? Because there's a lot of women watching this show. And so we want to ask you what makes us women great leaders? Because, traditionally and historically, we've seen a lot of men, right, throughout our lives. But you're saying now, because I know in history, long time ago, women, think about this, right? We bear children, we run a household. That's a business by itself.
Yeah.
You think about that, right? But what makes us women great leaders? Can you enlighten us on that, please?
Yeah, so there are a couple scientific reasons why women make great leaders and why I would say women are born for leadership specifically. So one is a psychological reason. So if we look at the roles of women through history, just as you were mentioning, women have taken on a caretaker role in society, whether they run the household or they run their community or they run the family unit. They have always taken on this caretaker nurturing role. So what has happened is passed down epigenetically through the generations of women through history. We have been programmed subconsciously to be caretakers. And what I mean by caretaker is not necessarily that we're always taking care of others, but what I mean is that we always have the collective in mind. So we are always thinking for the collective and about the collective. So even if you think of the way that you and I make decisions, or any of the women watching, we always carefully consider how everything that we do is going to impact the people around us, is going to impact our family, is going to impact our community. That is always running in the background because it is psychologically programmed in the female psyche to always be considering others. And so a woman technically is incapable of making a purely selfish decision because that's not the way her subconscious mind works. She's always going to be considering the greater impact of every decision that she makes, which in some cases, this can be a limitation because this can actually make us not ask for what we want or what we need because we may fear that it could have a negative impact on others. But in fact, if we become aware of this, we can lean into it and use that as our superpower to make better decisions for the collective, to make better decisions for our businesses, our communities, our families, our bottom line, whatever it is. So we can actually use that as a benefit to be better leaders. And the second reason is a neurochemistry related reason. And this is actually that a woman's brain is wired for leadership. So in one of the largest studies ever done on brain imaging, they looked at 40,000 SPECT scans of female and male brains. And this was run by Dr. Amen from the Dr. Amen clinics. And what they saw was out of 80 brain areas, 70 areas of the female brain were more active than the male brain. And they were specifically looking at areas that were involved in decision making and emotional intelligence, where women had more and superior activity, and actually showing the scientific evidence that women are wired for leadership and that we're built for leadership. And as I was talking to you earlier about our biochemistry with our biorhythm, because of the ebb and flow of the biochemical changes that happen within our body through all the phases of our female biorhythm, we actually see that the brain is changed during each of these phases. And that's because there are actually high densities of receptors in our brain for estrogen and progesterone, our two main hormones as women. And so when we look at this, especially in the hippocampus and the hypothalamus, we can see that women's brains are modulated by their hormones, making their brain function change throughout their cycle and actually providing them with certain cognitive superpowers.
So, for example, if we have more estrogen, because, you know, I hear a lot about my clients. So in the past, I've been treating a lot of people with breast cancer, right? Female mostly. But it's interesting, as the times change, even men are getting breast cancer, unfortunately, right? So what happens when we have a lot more estrogen? How does that affect us physically or even emotionally versus when we have more progesterone, or when we don't have any of those hormones when we get older? Can you share with us a little bit of your knowledge on that?
Yes, absolutely. And the good news is that no matter where we are on our life cycle, as women, we always have higher levels than men of estrogen and progesterone. And these two hormones are what rule our physiology and our function, our mood, our energy levels, everything as a woman throughout our lifetime. So Yeah. And so estrogen specifically has a great impact on our metabolic function.
Okay.
So the more estrogen that you have, the higher metabolic function that you typically have, and the more energy that you have. And so I know we'll go through all the phases of the biorhythm a little bit later, but I'll talk about how these two hormones ebb and flow through all the phases and impact our physiology and our brain function. But in general, when we look at the progesterone levels of a woman, it has a little bit of a different impact than the estrogen. And this is actually an impact on the brain. It actually activates something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor and neuronal growth factor, which are involved with neurogenesis. And so during the phases of our hormone cycle where we have higher levels of progesterone, our brain's ability to learn and grow is heightened. But we actually have a little bit less energy because that is the role of the estrogen.
Oh, interesting. So is that what makes women hysterical? Like, is it, you know how sometimes they're like, oh my God, it's the full moon or something's going on, but get away from that lady, right? Is that usually when you have a heightened estrogen or a heightened progesterone? When does that occur?
Actually, it's so funny. So just to back up a second, what makes women so hysterical is actually the focus of all investigative research on women in a clinical sense up till now. So women are actually left out of clinical research because we are so complex and we are ever changing. Our hormones ebb and flow, making us 4 different people throughout the month. So when this happens, it's very hard to actually research us because we're constantly changing. It's very difficult to research somebody who's changing all the time, right? Yes. And so if you look back in history, all of our clinical research done on women is really focused on answering this question, which is ridiculous because this isn't the only thing that women are known for, and this is actually something that is a result of dysfunction, is a result of being out of balance with our biorhythm. Yeah. So what makes women so hysterical is actually an imbalance of hormones. It's being out of balance with our biorhythm. And typically what causes this is having a lifestyle that is not in balance and aligned with our biorhythm and our biological needs that change consistently throughout the month. A lot of times what we see is that women will actually have the same routine day in and day out like their male counterparts.
Right.
Yeah. And when we look at women in leadership specifically, and we look at like the corporate infrastructure and business infrastructure, it's all designed around a man's biorhythm, which actually repeats every 24 hours.
Yes.
So because a woman's biorhythm is so different than that, it doesn't repeat on a 24-hour system. It repeats on a monthly-ish and different throughout our lifestyle or throughout our lifetime. And so because a woman's biorhythm is so different, we actually require a very different environment and schedule and workflow than a man if we truly want to thrive and if we don't want to go into imbalance and become hysterical, right?
Oh my gosh. Oh, see, that's like a key to everything, right?
Yes.
So when they get married, right, a male and the female should say, please make sure you don't copy what I do.
Yes, exactly. If you're living with a male counterpart, whether it be your husband or your son or your partner or your colleague or whoever, if you're expecting to behave and thrive in the same exact environment as them, then you're setting yourself up for failure because it's actually not possible. Our biology is such that it requires different things throughout the course of a month and throughout our lifetime. And so once we understand that and we actually make peace with that and we align our lifestyle to match our biological needs, that's when the magic happens.
All right. I'll make sure that this is sent to all my male clients. Well, yeah, because it's a very deep understanding of you don't have to be like your wife, because you know how long time ago we were trained that you become as one, but it doesn't mean you mirror every single thing that a person does. Can you imagine if a male actually mirrors the female and vice versa? But it's funny because we're so malleable, the women, right? We're so flexible that
Yeah.
we actually tend to imitate the male more to satisfy them and to make sure they're not upset. That's the old culture, right? Old
Yeah.
tradition and religion and practices that we've had. So I read that every woman, right, is different. But so if we're different, let's say, so in our household, in my household at least, I really learned to be myself, and my husband is himself. We're different, and we've accepted that. That's the secret for the long-term marriage. So, what is the key to our success, our health, and vitality, and our ability to lead as women, as female leaders?
Yeah, so the female biorhythm is the key to unlock our success, to unlock our higher cognition, higher levels of energy, better mood, better relationships, more influence. Our biorhythm is the key to all of it. And it all starts with creating an intimate relationship with our biorhythm, which begins by understanding what it is, how it functions, and what is our status in our biorhythm personally. So for instance, right now, I already know what phase of my biorhythm I'm in because I track it. And so I am actually in the luteal phase of my hormone cycle, of my biorhythm. And so I live my lifestyle accordingly to that as much as possible.
Okay, so go ahead and share with us the 4 different female biorhythm phases so that the audience can understand. So what's the first thing? Let's start with that.
Yes. So the first phase is the menstruation phase. And this is actually what I like to call the shed phase, because not only are we kind of shedding our uterine lining, we're shedding actually physically, but we are shedding the things that no longer serve us if we are living in alignment with our biorhythm. And so as we talked about at the very beginning of this, our superpower, our cognitive superpower during the menstruation phase is intuition. And so quickly, I just want to give a little historical story about a woman's intuition and how ancient cultures actually used to know this very thing about a woman before modern science finally is starting to discover it just now. But ancient cultures already knew this and actually created their tribes and their cultures around this fact right here. Wow. So have you ever heard the story of the red tent?
No, go ahead, share with all of us.
Okay, so the story of the red tent has been largely misconstrued over time to be a story about the woes of a woman and her period, but that's actually not what the true story is.
Okay.
The true story is that a woman's biorhythm is her superpower. So when we look at how the ancient tribes used to function, what happened is that all the women in the tribe would be on the same exact cycle, because back then they all lived the same lifestyle and we didn't have endocrine disruptors and all of these things that mess up our hormones.
Yep.
And so all the women in the tribe would cycle at the same time. And so they would all be in the menstruation phase at the same time. The tribe recognized how powerful this was and created a place where the women went, the red tent. It probably wasn't a red tent. It was probably, who knows what it was, but they were the women of the tribe during this very special phase of their hormone cycle were sent to the red tent so that they could tap into their intuitive insight and actually create the plans for the tribe for the next 28-day cycle. So they actually led the entire tribe based on using this cognitive superpower that they have during menstruation. And the tribe actually realized that the female biorhythm is like a biofeedback system to direct them to success.
Right, right. Because it's like letting go, like you said,
Yep.
of no longer serves us.
Yes.
And if the women are usually, it's a collective mind, right? So they're able to tap in intuitively into other people's thoughts and feelings. Well, definitely they'll be able to plan ahead. So now that makes sense, because when I experience heightened intuition, you know how you literally, I can plan for the whole 3 months ahead or 6 months ahead, or sometimes years ahead. You get these downloads, right? So you're saying that that's usually during menstruation phase. So is it like a few days before that day happens, or it is actually the day that you're having the menstruation, or the days of the menstruation?
It's throughout all the days of menstruation, which is different for different women. But for me, typically that's around 5 days. Days, you could call it day 1 to day 5 of your cycle, when you're actively shedding. Because remember, your estrogen and your progesterone are at their lowest level. Both of them are at their lowest level. And so what's happening?
Is that what we get tired and we want to just rest during that time?
Exactly. So our body is innately and divinely designed to utilize the superpowers we have. So what's happening is our body is starting to slow down, and it's telling us, don't be outwardly expressive, energetic. Don't use your resources outwardly. You have to use them very carefully. And what your body is trying to do is make you go inside, is to go internal, spend time with yourself and explore internally so that you can utilize this intuitive insight that you have during this phase.
So the women that are already in menopause, do they actually still experience this, but there's just not enough red blood cells to go out? Like, how does that work for people that are already like menopause or post-menopause?
Yeah, so post-menopause is a very special time in a woman's hormone cycle as well, because once you get past all the ups and downs of going through perimenopause, menopause, and you finally reach post-menopause, your hormones have finally calmed down and they're steady. And so they actually remain steady pretty much all the time. There's little ebbs and flows, but what happens is technically all of your female superpowers then become static. And so instead of when you're actively cycling and each superpower is kind of coming online and going away, coming online, going away, right, during each phase, when you get into menopause, or sorry, post-menopause, where your hormones have stabilized, you have access to all of the superpowers at the same time, but not quite as strongly as you do when it is just coming on, just that superpower in each phase.
Got it. Got it. Oh, that is so informative. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Kayla, how about, what's the next phase? So after menstruation.
After menstruation, we have the follicular phase. And so the follicular phase is what I like to call the plant phase, because this is like, if you think of a plant, this is when you're planting the seeds, right? This is when we're planting the seeds of our leadership abilities. This is when we're planting the seeds of our business. This is when we're planting the seeds of whatever it is that we got that intuitive insight during the first phase. Now it's time to plant the seeds of that, right?
Creating a foundation, in other words, in the male cycle.
Yes.
Is that correct? It's kind of like, okay, it's going to be this program or this program. It's like outline the foundation of something.
Exactly. So this is our strategic planning phase. This is the time to actually take those insights that we got and put it in an actionable plan and start the delegation process. During
Mm.
this phase, what we also see in our neurochemistry is that it shifts such that our emotional intelligence begins to increase significantly during this phase. And
Okay.
so as that happens, we have a better ability to work and communicate with others. So this is a great time to be working with your teams, to be leading your teams, to be delegating the tasks of your strategic plan to your teams. And
Wow.
this is a great time to allocate resources because remember, in menstruation, when you have that intuition, you can decide how best to allocate your resources. And now it's time to act upon that during the follicular phase.
All right. That is awesome. So I think a lot of the clients get stuck in the next phase, right? Like actually that phase itself just to
Yeah.
create a foundation because they think of being an employee, you know, how everything's provided for you because there's already a foundation.
Right.
The office works, right? But unfortunately, like you said, a lot of it is based on a male function. It's kind of like repeat, rinse and repeat, like wash. I was thinking about the things I was washing. I'm like, you wash, you turn it on, you put detergent. It's the same cycle over and over again. And I think for most people, they want consistency of income, consistency of everything. So they want things to work. But I think this is the kryptonite part of
Yes.
a lot
Yes.
of the women. They're like, but I planted the seed. How come it's not moving? How come it's not growing? So what is the next phase after that?
Yeah. Well, and I just want to mention that consistency is a man's game, not a woman's game. Even though we may like it and we may want it for ourselves, we are actually designed for inconsistency. We are designed to lose all the time. And that's part of our superpower. So we really need to lean into that fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the next phase is the ovulation phase. And I like to call this phase the bloom phase because this is when we bloom. We planted the seeds and now we are blooming. And what I mean by that is estrogen is up to its peak by ovulation. It has been steadily rising through follicular, and in ovulation, estrogen has reached its peak. And what that means, as we talked about before, is our metabolic function is at its highest. Our energy levels are at their highest. And we actually, when we look at our brain chemistry, we have extra mood boosting neurochemicals as a result of this rise in estrogen. And when we reach ovulation, we are at the peak and we are feeling our best. We're feeling very energetic. And so our cognitive superpower during this phase is charisma. We are very magnetic during this phase. We have high energy, we have high mood, and we can influence others during this time.
Got it.
So this is a great time, even though it's a very short phase, 1 to 3 days. This is a great time to give your pitches. This is a great time to network. This is a great time to pitch to strategic partners. This is a great time for you to influence in whatever way that you influence as a woman leader.
Wow, thank you. That's perfect. Now, obviously, like for us that know muscle testing, that could be a muscle testing capacity, right? We could test when am I going to have menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and luteal phase so that I can actually plan my appearances and my JV partnerships with other people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes,
Awesome.
muscle testing is an absolutely great way to test which phase you're in or how long your phases are. So you can check on how many days each phase lasts for you specifically. And you can also track, there's a couple other ways to track that you can use in tandem with your muscle testing. One of which is to track your basal body temperature. Because during ovulation is when your temperature shifts up and it remains elevated through the back half of your cycle. And during the front half, during menstruation and follicular, it is a little bit lower. And then the other way to measure is you can use like different apps that are out there. There's one called the Clue app that actually helps you to track your cycle and makes it really easy based on the last day of your last period, if you're still having your period. And you can also put in other symptoms that you might be having throughout your cycle to figure out where you are.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. How about what's the last phase now?
The last phase is my favorite phase, and maybe this is because I'm a scholar and a scientist, so I've spent all my life in school learning. It is the luteal phase. So the luteal phase is the grow phase, and what happens during this phase is estrogen is coming back down during this phase, so our energy levels start to come back down. But what happens is progesterone steps into the limelight and becomes the superstar during the luteal phase. And as I mentioned before, progesterone impacts our cognitive function in such a way that it helps us to have higher acuity and a greater ability to learn and a greater ability to even teach. So during this phase, this is a great time to teach. This is a great time to take your courses. This is a great time to get your continuing education credits. This is a great time to learn new things and retain these new things that you learn, because our brain's ability to actually create memories that last is heightened during this phase. Our superpower during this phase is acuity, and especially verbal acuity, because this is when you can actually get your message across very clearly. You can teach, but you can also learn at a heightened ability during this phase. So as a lifetime student, I wish that I would have known about this a long time ago, because this would have really helped in my workflow and in my study flow, so that I could learn the things that I was studying in school throughout my life at a faster pace and more efficiently.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to say, so basically you're saying that women, we are 4 different people every single month.
Yes. Yes. And so imagine that. Imagine, and if you really think about it with yourself, you can realize how this is true and how this plays out in your own life. That there are so many different things happening within our body during all of these phases that we are essentially 4 different people with 4 different sets of needs throughout the month. And this is why a woman will not thrive in an environment that is repeating and the same every single day. We require different environments as we change biochemically, neurochemically, and physiologically.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So I want to ask the audience if they have any questions for you, okay?
Yes.
Just because I know that some people want to know a little bit of why am I like this? So I think Aviana, our emotion code practitioner, has a question for you. All right, so let me bring her up on stage. Hey, Vienna, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be together with you lovely ladies.
Oh, thank you. So do you have any question for Kayla?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So I'm postmenopausal. And so one of my questions is, what do I need to pay attention to hormone-wise? I've just I'm not really having issues that I know of. There may be times that I'm kind of low energy or something, but what kind of questions do I need to ask my doctor to make sure I've got the right doctor? How would I find someone to guide me naturally and not suggest something that's going to be harmful for me?
Absolutely. I love this question, and it's such an important question, not only postmenopausally, but my answer is for all women, wherever you are in your hormone cycle. Unfortunately, because of the lifestyles that we lead, because we have all these endocrine disruptors in our environment, different chemicals and even different foods that disrupt our hormones, and special diets that we follow that actually harm our hormones, we all have some level of hormonal dysfunction at some point in our lives. And what you were mentioning about having brain fog or lower energy, those are all good signs that your body talking to you and telling you that there is some level of dysfunction. There's some level of imbalance, is what I mean by dysfunction. And so the best thing to do is, if you have a regular doctor, or even if you're seeing a functional medicine doctor, you can ask them to test your hormone levels. But it's very important that you understand, that you tell them and that they ask what phase of your cycle you are in, if you are still cycling actively, to know where your hormone levels should be, because again, they change throughout the month. Now, postmenopausally, they should be pretty steady, but you should still have pretty significant levels of estrogen and progesterone. And when you go into postmenopause, the key player, the superstar, is going to be progesterone over estrogen, because you're going to have higher levels of it. So creating enough progesterone is really, really important to thrive in your years of postmenopause. And so having your doctor measure where your estrogen and your progesterone levels are, seeing if they are at the appropriate level, and if not, they can give you suggestions on how you can naturally bring those up, some of which will be eliminating these endocrine disruptors from your environment, from your food. Some of them will also be changing your diet so that you can get the cofactors needed to create these hormones. So for instance, getting really high quality, healthy fats is imperative for women, but also getting a certain level of carbohydrate is also imperative for healthy hormone function. And that kind of goes against what society tells us today, where we should all be low carb or carnivore, or we should only be plant-based or whatever. But these different diets that are so stringent, they actually don't work well for a woman, because as we know, we have different needs throughout our lives and throughout our hormone cycle itself. And so that means that we actually have to eat in accordance with each phase and with each life phase.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you have a book that you recommend? My battery is low, so I make it off my truck. I will rewatch to see what the answer was. Yeah, books to recommend, some things that you've written yourself, videos you have, a program we can take. I need more information.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a program out for women, and specifically for women leaders, wherever they are in their life phase of the hormones, where they can learn exactly what does it mean to be ruled by estrogen and progesterone. How do these two hormones impact our physiology, our brain function, and our biochemistry throughout our entire lives, and what they can do to come into balance with their biorhythm and get the most energy, the most brain function, the most success, the best mood, and the most happiness and fulfillment from their life by coming into alignment with their body and in partnership with their body throughout their lifetime.
Awesome. Wow, thank you so much. So everyone check out her Leadership Biorhythm program. And if we're going to send this out by email, because I think for those of you who missed the show, you missed a lot, because this is about you as a woman. This is about how to take care of you so that your moods are not going erratic up and down the yin yang, like you're in a playground or like a kid always tantruming, because I'm sure our partners, if you have any, right, I think they appreciate it so much better when they can understand you as well.
Yes. Right? Life is better for everyone. Life is better for everyone when we are in balance with our own body and our own biorhythm. Life becomes better for us and everybody around us.
Like the old saying, when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Nobody's happy, right?
And this is where that comes from.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Kayla. Oh my gosh, this has
Thank
been
you so
a
much.
phenomenal experience. Thank you, Vienna, for popping in your busy schedule here, and thank you so much. Wow. So
Thank you.
again, herbiorhythm.com, and then there's a long number there. So we're gonna put this on the email. We're gonna send it out either tonight or tomorrow, and then there's another chance to actually take advantage of this. Is there a deadline for the program, Kayla?
So right now we are in a special enrollment period. The course is normally $2,297 for an entire year of enrollment, but right now we have enrollment at $997 for the entire year, and that's only until July 23rd. So make sure that you snag that special price before it goes back up to the regular price.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So we're going to email that link to all of you. Like I said, watch out in the email. If you are not part of our list, you can go to Facebook group, Wealthy Money Mindset, and you can get all the goodies. We're actually decluttering right now the whole 2 weeks, right? Because we want to give space for our new self, our new you to come out. So we're doing a free contest of decluttering, and we're guiding them as they're doing this. So might as well put in the correct programs that your body will thank you for and your whole family will thank you for. So thank you, Kayla, for such a wonderful experience, and I will see you soon again. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Wow.